Do you ever wish you were British?
Always.
All right. Well, I'm Nate.
I'm Rach.
And this is Pew Pew Time. Today we're
Pew
talking
pew.
about Ahsoka. Yeah, I always forget. Today
I
we're
know,
talking
I
about
do
Ahsoka, Chapter 4, which is titled Fallen Jedi.
Fallen
Rich,
Jedi.
you wanna do the rundown of the episode real quick?
Sure. So in Fallen Jedi, we open on Sabine and Huyang, and they're still on the ship, still on the planet, still in hiding, trying to get a hold of Hera, trying to get comms working, whatever. Ahsoka and Sabine are kind of talking. The map is being discussed, and there's this kind of tension on what's going to happen. Then we discover assassin droids have found the ship. Everything has to kind of get going. We see Morgan and Baylan talking about what's about to happen. They're ready to get going. She's working on the mapping coordinates and all of that.
That
The
witch
fight
magic.
Right, the witch magic. Fight ensues at the ship. You know, the assassin droids are there. Shin is there, and everything kind of starts to happen. We see that Ahsoka is it kind of breaks off. Ahsoka is fighting this Marrok.
Yeah.
I always mess
Marrok.
Marrok.
That sounds right. Yeah. Marrok.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
It's embarrassing. Anyway, and then Sabine is fighting Shin. Whatever, Ahsoka defeats her dude, and it's like, okay, we're going to split up, even though we know Huyang said not to. That's going to come back later, I'm sure. Anyway, flash to Ahsoka's fighting Baylan. We're, at the kind of pinnacle of this moment of trying to, end everything with the map. She stops the coordinates from happening. We see her disappear off the cliff's edge. Sabine shows up, and Sabine gives in to this temptation of wanting to find Ezra. And the map then, coordinates found, map gets destroyed. Sabine is on the ring. Surprise, here's Hera and a few ships. And unfortunately, we watch them get kind of destroyed. Not all of them, but a couple.
Yeah, there's a couple of them.
And we see Sabine on the ring headed into hyperspace with Baylan, Shin, and Morgan and all of their peeps. Meanwhile, Ahsoka, we aren't sure what happened to her, but then we see her in this very ethereal space.
Yes.
And question what that is. We'll talk about that later. And lo and behold, we encounter Mr. Anakin Skywalker as well.
Yes.
And I loved the very closing quick beat of the Vader theme, which I recognized.
Yeah.
And that was, I think you did too,
gosh.
which was fun. So that is the synopsis of this week's episode, Fallen Jedi.
So if if you've been watching these episodes, like there have been, one or two even that like, it felt like not a lot happened. Things were moving kind of slow and everything. And it feels like in this episode, they're like, all right, now we're going to pick up speed. It's just like all of a sudden it took off and like 1,000 things happened. And
yeah,
again, we're trying to keep a shorter format here than our hour and 20-minute episodes. So you're going to have to really work hard, but we got a lot of good notes. There's so much we could talk about. Anyway, first thing I want to talk about real quick is the title of the episode, Fallen Jedi, which we decided to talk about really three specific like themes or things that happened and focus in on those. Fallen Jedi is, I don't know. I think, I don't know if it's, the showrunners like trying to be cheeky or whatever, but it could, it seems the obvious thing that they'd be talking about, the obvious people they'd be talking about are Baylan Skoll and Shin Hati, right? They're the like dark Jedi that we've been watching this whole time. Mm-hmm. But I almost wonder if they're hinting that these fallen Jedi, it could just mean something else, right? Mm-hmm. Right. In my mind, there are some things here that like feel a little not Jedi-ish that we see both Sabine and Ahsoka doing. Right. I don't think that they're becoming bad guys, but like there are some themes there, and I wonder a little if Fallen Jedi is hinting at more than just the two that we already know about, right?
Right.
You had thoughts too,
I
right?
mean, well, yeah, and I was going to say we see Ahsoka, I think, and we'll talk about this theme sort of in a little bit, but I think we see Ahsoka in this weird kind of struggle really with emotion is what it seems like. And we know she has kind of disregarded the Jedi Order over and over again to Hu Yang. Like we've seen that a few times where she's like, I'm not a Jedi. Quit talking about Jedi stuff. Like that's not real anymore. We don't do that anymore. This isn't, you know. And I think there's something to be said for, you know, again, like we said, what does fallen Jedi mean? Does that mean to the dark side, just stepped away from the Jedi Order, you know?
Right.
So I kind of question, like, could this be Ahsoka? Could it be a literal fallen Jedi? I mean, not to spoiler alert the episode, but at the end she falls off a cliff and ends up in some kind of weird plane that we don't fully understand yet.
Maybe she's dead.
Right. So, I mean, like Anakin, well, never mind. We'll talk about that. Anakin's in it too, but you know, he makes a comment to her that indicates
Ahsoka
like,
fell.
Yeah, right. So anyway, and that could be, you know, a component too of the Fallen Jedi. So who knows? I mean, I'm sure we'll see more of it, but it was interesting that was the episode title because we question what that really means, right? I mean,
right.
Yeah.
And Anakin is a fallen Jedi himself. I mean, like,
that was the other thing.
It could be every single one of these characters. You know, it's crazy. Anyway, let's jump into our themes. The first one is about sort of the relationship between Sabine and Ahsoka, you know, the master apprentice thing, whatever. But also like what is going on with identity here? You know, I mean, we've sort of beat this to death. I'm so fascinated by Ahsoka jumping back and forth between like being a Jedi, not being a Jedi. Now she's never said she's a Jedi. But like there's this real like question of identity for me about who is Ahsoka, who is Sabine, like what do they believe and everything. Saying I'm not a Jedi doesn't tell me who they are anymore. You know what I mean? Like if she's this sort of like I'm still fighting for good and everything, which it seems like that's the thing, but like is she not worried about the sort of emotional stuff that we started to see? I said right off the bat, she seems kind of grumpy, which, you know, we all have bad days, you know. I mean, like Qui-Gon Jinn seemed a little grumpy with Jar Jar Binks in episode 1. These things happen a little bit. Right. But it just feels like not the like at peace, like Jedi Zen thing, you know?
Sure. Well, it is funny. She seems to go back and forth, you know, because as you said, there's this like inner struggle that we see in her because she, you know, denies the Jedi Order and, you know, quit calling me a Jedi, whatever. But then she talks about Sabine being her Padawan and, you know, and then starts to teach Sabine how to use the Force in a very Jedi way. I mean, and she talks about her emotions and, you know, the moment where we hear the conversation about like, you know, the like whatever we're feeling, like we have to do what's right for the, you know, for the good of everybody, you know, whatever.
Right.
And telling her to put emotion aside, that's a very Jedi mentality, you know?
Right. Yeah, well, she brought in Hu Yang to teach her like Jedi basics, right? Like she brought in the Jedi droid to kind of figure all this stuff out. I don't know. It just feels like I don't know if at the end of this they're going to land on like we are the Jedi and we're going to do the right thing. We're going to rebuild the Jedi Order, or if maybe they'll just disappear. I don't know. But like, it just feels like there's still a question as to what their goals are. I mean, obviously they're trying to stop the bad guys and that sort of thing, but it's bizarre. And Ahsoka has, you know, a lot of like sort of trust questions with Sabine. You hit on this a little bit, that kind of like, can I count on you? Which, by the way, is something that is very similar to what Ezra said before he disappeared, right? He said like, I'm counting on you, right? It's like, thanks for bringing that up, Ahsoka. Yeah, thanks for just rubbing that in a little bit,
right?
You know, and she says, well, you know, you can. And then later on, she's saying, you know, don't worry about me. And she goes, I'm not. Should I be? And she goes, what? Worried? Nope. Like, it's just this, it's silly, to be honest, you know, but like, there is, at least I perceive a bit of like, lack of confidence in, you know, in Sabine in particular, but like, also just kind of this weird like dynamic between the two. And I don't know.
Well, and it's crazy. we know the last time Ahsoka trusted Sabine, she left the room with her and the map, and she took off.
Yeah, she
you know?
stole. So she stole from Sabine something very important.
yeah. And then, that's the kind of thing where it's like, she still knows Sabine is still this person who took off thinking she knew better and she could do this a better way, and then ended up losing their one thing that has now caused all of this.
The one lead,
they got the map. So that's the thing where it's like, can I trust you? Like, do I need to be worried? I'm going to ask you again, because I don't know if I should be worried, because she is. I mean, clearly Ahsoka is worried about Sabine in this situation. So
there is a cool moment that the HK droids come out and they attack Hu Yang, whatever, and the girls come out to fight him off and everything. And there is some really cool, they're really jiving together. You can see covering each other, and Sabine takes a couple of blasts in the armor and then blocks some of them and is shooting guys, and she's the one that actually takes down the HK droid that was after Hu Yang and everything. But again, Sabine comes out with blasters first. The Jedi thing is still very difficult, very very new to her and everything. So
and that's something I want to point out too, just really quickly, as we're talking about identity, not to get too far away what we're talking about, but we're talking about Ahsoka having this kind of inner struggle clearly, but Sabine is also keeps going back and forth on the Force or Mandalorian, Jedi or Mandalorian, and it feels like there's this constant struggle for her. And there's a moment that I wanted to mention that we see when Sabine has been fighting Shin, and she's on the ground, and she puts her hand up, like she's going to try and force choke or push her back or whatever. Shin.
Well, and Shin even is
Shin kind of flinches. And then in a very condescending or maybe just
rude,
authoritarian kind of rude way, she's like, you have no power. You are doing nothing. And then immediately Sabine's hand
she senses
turns
you have
sideways.
no connection to the Force.
Right. And so Sabine, then her hand just shifts a little bit to the right or whatever, and she shoots her with the weapon in her, wrist armor, her whatever, arm armor. Anyway.
Yeah, her vambrace things in her arms.
Right. Yeah. And, that's the kind of thing where it's we're seeing in multiple occasions here where she lands back on Mandalorian versus Jedi. But again, there's the struggle. She wants to be able to use the Force, but it's just not clicking yet. Like you said, maybe at some point it'll just happen, but we don't know. Yeah,
I hope
if
so.
That's the goal.
The trouble is the Mandalorian mindset is so stubborn and so forceful and so whatever, that the Jedi mindset, which is so, it should be anyway, so at peace, so calm, so, whatever, trusting in the Force and all that,
Sure.
They seem so against each other, but we know, now we know, according to Hu Yang, originally we just knew of Tar Vizsla was the only Jedi who had ever, a Mandalorian who'd ever been a Jedi. But allegedly now, because of things that Hu Yang has said now in this series, there have been, very few or something he said. So it's certainly more than one,
Right.
So we know these things can coexist, it's just, she doesn't seem to have an aptitude for the Force. And maybe, like we said, hopefully she's just a late bloomer. I don't know. Maybe she's going to do something in the end that saves everybody. And it's some big self-sacrifice move or something like that.
Sure.
I don't know. But
yeah, who knows?
It's a very Jedi trait.
Yeah. So we're seeing this inner struggle. Yeah. But between both Sabine and Ahsoka, like you said, we just see a lot of weird emotions, almost awkwardness. And then there's this moment when they're leaving the ship after the HKs have been there, and Hu Yang, it's just cute. He's like, one thing, stay together. You always did better together. He knows, he remembers, and I think that's just a cool thing. And then they both kind of say well, we are going to go, they kind of emphasize their response.
There's
to
this
him.
sort of cute, we will.
Yeah.
Hu
of
Yang,
course. And then, that lasts for about 5 minutes.
It's a sweet moment, but
it is.
Again. Yeah. So I want to point out when Ahsoka defeats Marrok, whatever whatever he was, which by
Marrok,
the way, man, that's something we could talk about. What he was, who he was, whatever it's a very interesting topic. But anyway, she defeats him, and then Shin sees that she's by herself now, and they fight a little bit, and Sabine says go, I can handle this or whatever. I'm okay.
Right.
And that is not, I think, what did I write? I said like it's either like, again, sort of a feeling of self-sacrifice there, or it's an overconfidence,
arrogance,
I mean,
right?
to be honest, I think it's got to be the first one, because like she's been beaten by this girl before. She knows that she is like weak. She can't do the Jedi thing yet, really. You know what I mean? So my guess is just she thinks this is bigger than me. You know what I mean? Like she needs to go ahead and like complete our mission or whatever. I hope that that's what it is. But it did seem a little bit like immediately they split up after telling Hu Yang that they would stick together.
Right. And I think it just was foreshadowing. We're like, oh, well, something's definitely going to go wrong because Hu Yang said they should stay together and they didn't. I mean, yeah.
Well, there's also, to me, some of this, like, I feel just this little like wisps of like maybe some of this is choreographed. Like maybe they're intentionally doing something here. You mentioned Sabine sort of like falling, to the whatever, and that's moving into the next thing a little bit. But like, I wonder a little bit if maybe some of that's fake. I don't know yet. Anyway,
she's trying to put on some kind of like farce that she's actually,
maybe. I mean, maybe she's faking it. It's a little hard to tell. So real quick, I mean, before we move on from the whole like who are the good guys, what's their identity thing anymore?
Right.
There's this weird duality. Whatever, the Baylan and Ahsoka, when Ahsoka finally approaches him, she is kind of aggressive. She's kind of predatory, and he's quiet, at peace. He's still, he's contemplative,
Right.
Now he is stalling. I think he knows that the whole like navigation, the whatever, the nav computer on the big ring, it needs time to be ready still.
Right.
So like you could just say maybe he's stalling, but it's weird how much he acts like more like a Jedi, maybe even than Sabine in this interaction, because he's quiet, he's with it, whatever. Yeah, sorry, then Ahsoka. And Ahsoka is like stalking around him, like, and she looks kind of angry. Like there's something about it that just doesn't feel quite right to me. And I don't know, again, maybe it's just we got to make it look cool for TV, so she's angry at him or whatever. I don't know, But it's just something about that felt a little wrong. And Baylan is sort of the gentleman knight character, and everything. And anyway. There's also this, I got to point out this thing that it comes up a lot to me throughout Star Wars is in, not Return of the Jedi, sorry, Empire Strikes Back, Yoda tells Luke, a Jedi uses the Force, or whatever he says, Jedi uses the Force for knowledge and defense, never attack, right? But if you look, I mean, like often you see these... In that instance, like you see, he sends Luke into the cave, right, where he undergoes this like test in the Force, this cave that's strong in the Force, and he tells him not to bring his lightsaber, not to bring his weapons, right? He says you won't need them, but he takes them anyway. Again, in his mind, like fighting is still the way to go and all that, And he goes in there, and he, whatever. Luke says, "What will I find?" And he says, "Only what you take with you." Again, giving him the clues here, but he's not getting it.
Yeah.
So he goes in there with his weapons, and what he finds is Darth Vader. And you know who draws first? Luke does. You know what I mean? He goes in there, and Darth Vader's in there, and Luke pulls up his lightsaber first. Now, you could say that it's defense, but like, I don't know. It just feels to me like a failure of understanding what Jedi are, in a sense.
Absolutely.
And then, like you could see this a number of times throughout the series where like a Jedi will draw first, and it feels like, I don't know if that was the right thing to do. You know what I mean? So like in this case, like Ahsoka draws first. You know what I mean? It's this like, this is coming to a fight. And Baylan even is kind of like, it didn't have to be this way. Now, he was saying it very angrily just before he pushed her off a cliff. But I don't know.
Well,
the whole thing is just this kind of like, they're trying to muddy up the waters, I think, or something. They're trying to make it kind of like, who is the good guy here? And I wonder, what, if that's going to build to anything, or if that's just going to fall away when in the heat of the moment, when everything comes down to it. Yeah.
I was going to say, there was a moment when she drew her saber and he drew his, where he said, how inevitable, like that he saw this coming, that it was like, and that was like, and I think, mentioning Ahsoka being more aggressive, there was a moment when she was fighting Marrok that she went to this almost Jedi place, like her. Did you notice that? Like where she, right before she destroyed him, she got to this like peace position. Yeah. And she like kind of settled into what I would consider like a move of the Jedi, which is not aggression, but like peace and focus. And then as he's coming at her with his spinning, Inquisitor kind of lightsaber thing, she just in one like fell swoop swings around him and boom, he's gone.
Yeah.
And I think that's interesting then that suddenly she's in this other situation and she's the opposite. She's this like,
she bounces
I'm
around.
going to get you. I'm going to get you. Yeah. And it's, I think my guess is it stems from her lack of completed training. She's not really fully Jedi, and she's afraid and she's right. And she's, got this kind of like, I have to stop him. I have to stop this from happening. And he does try to, this is kind of getting into the next thing we were talking about, but he does kind of try to like play to her a little bit. Like he tries to kind of be manipulative. Yeah. We see it in the way he interacts with Ahsoka and then later Sabine. But, I think she just senses that right away and is like, nope, there's nothing you can say that's going to change, what I'm thinking or whatever.
Right. But, well, and I think you bring up a great point. And this is one of my interesting things about this dynamic. Just that Ahsoka fears, like when she tells, Sabine, like, we might have to do the hard thing here and give up our friend so that these people don't get Admiral Thrawn back, right? Grand Admiral Thrawn back. And there's this like doubt that Sabine will be able to let go of her attachment to Ezra, right?
Right.
But like, I think that's what's troubling Sabine here a little bit is this attachment. You know what I mean? And when Sabine is presumed dead for a moment, when Shin comes back before Sabine, there's this moment where she was like, Sabine, and she's like, you can see the fear and the whatever. And then she gets a little angry and it's like, that little bit of attachment I see, little whatever, which again, it's ironic there, but also like, that's the problem that her master had. That's what drove Anakin, right? And I just had a long talk with some buddies about this today, about the nature of love versus attachment and how Kanan Jarrus may have been the only Jedi that ever managed it right, But anyway, it was really interesting.
Interesting. Yeah.
But yeah, we can move on. You were moving toward this anyway. Yeah. I think it works. Oh, real quick. One of the things that Baylan says, he says, the legacy of your master is one, your legacy, like your master's, is one of death and destruction, which is like, oof. Yeah. Like to say that to a Jedi as a dark Jedi, it's like, I don't know, man. What's going on here?
Right.
So I'll be interested to see how that pays off in the end.
Right. But speaking of that interaction, so let's just kind of talk about that dynamic a little deeper. One of the things that was interesting. So when Ahsoka shows up, he's knelt down or he's in this like very Jedi kind of position. He's kneeling with his back to, and he's there to protect the map, whatever. Like you said, like we talked about, he does get manipulative right off the bat. And he says, that Anakin, he doesn't say like your master. He says, Anakin spoke very highly of you. He speaks about Anakin as if, they were buddies, and then she very like matter of factly says, he never mentioned you.
Bitterly.
And very much so.
Again, I don't know. Sorry. I don't want to cut off your point.
That's all right.
I hate the like, and maybe this is just the nature of the dark side, is that maybe it's less blunt and it's more alluring. Maybe it's hiding,
it's
hiding evil talking behind.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's, there's a Lord of the Rings line where Frodo is trying to weigh out Strider, who is Aragorn, and he says like, I feel like an agent of the enemy would feel fouler and appear fairer, or something like that, right?
Yep.
He's saying like,
I love that.
There's a temptation, like they the bad guys looking sort of like whatever.
Like they are better. Like point. They're more, yeah. And I think you're right.
Or even playing polite, while hiding cruel, evil intentions.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I think in this moment, she's not going to play any games with him. So that's where there's this struggle for me. You were talking to me, her aggressiveness, and it's like, but at the same time, she is business in this situation, and she knows the map needs to get disconnected as soon as possible. She doesn't fully know what's going on right now, but she's like, I'm not talking with you about this. Like, and by cutting it off that he never mentioned you, it kind of shuts it down, Now, then he makes this comment of few would live to see what he became, which I thought was, I mean,
Oof.
I feel like Baylan is so poetic. Like everything he says, he doesn't have that many lines, but everything he says is like, oh man, like, and
he's like an evil Jedi, William Wallace or something.
Right, right. And it's so like interesting, you know, in his purpose in that was just trying to, I feel like he was trying to like speak to Ahsoka in a way that would like be alluring. And then it was like, let me get under her skin a little bit, you know? And I think, you know, he starts to question in the midst of their fighting, like why Ahsoka left. You know, he tries to explain to her he's securing the future, that, you know, she's like, so you want to start a war? And he's like, I'm not going to start, you know, Thrawn's going to start it. And they're like having this whole conversation. And then he also says this line, one must destroy in order to create. And so he's envisioning that this better, you know, existence is going to be out of another. Right. I'm like, that to me is so confusing what that means. But
there's a whole lot of like vague like implications that I just feel like we hopefully will understand at some point. And it's not just like nothing, you know, it sounds really interesting. I'm trying to figure out where this is building to exactly. But.
Right. It's very confusing. And, you know, and then there's this moment, which I think we talked about a little bit, because you were talking about, you know, how so then she knocks the you know, the map off, like gets him kind of off a little bit off kilter. She's able to go up and grab, and then she's clearly injured. She's not at full capacity in her skills or whatever.
She burns her hand on it a little bit. Something happens there, and I don't know if it's the magic or if it's hot or what, you know what I mean?
Right.
But
and it seems like that was probably her dominant. Yeah. And so she's injured, you know, and he goes, you shouldn't have done that. It's this like, you shouldn't have done that. Like now you've ruined everything. Right.
Yeah.
And he comes at her with a much more aggressive kind of thing. He is no longer being, you know, his whatever.
His cordialness has sort of faded.
It's waned. And he's like, nope, now I'm just mad at you. And and there was this thing he said that was interesting to me, where he says, maybe we were talking about down later, but where he talks about, gosh, no, I lost it. Oh, where he says, you know, it didn't need to come to this, where he's about to like push her off the cliff. It didn't need to come to this. And I kind of question what did he think was going to happen? Like, did he really think, I mean, like, was he hoping to side with her? I mean, there's a moment when he and Morgan are talking and she questions, I mean, she kind of asks him, you know, or they're talking about having found the ship. That's what it is. It's a moment where they're talking about having found the ship. And she goes, do I detect a hint of fear? And he goes, just experience, like just the knowledge that I'm about to go against another Jedi. And this is going to be unfortunate, sort of. And and I think that's something that's interesting, is that even at this point, he's angry at her. He's like, why did you have to do that? We could have maybe worked together. Like it's like he wants, it's such a weird, you know, dissonance in him too, that there's this character, you know, it really is. It's really unfortunate that he's gone after this season, but still, I think there's just been a lot of interesting in his development and just the mystery behind what he really stands for, you know?
Well, so he's so, like, you know, I mean, you mentioned when she comes in and he's sort of like still sitting there and everything. And, you know, he says, Anakin spoke highly of you, whatever. And it's like, it is, I mean, like, obviously he's got other things going on. He's playing a game here a little bit. He's trying to slow this whole thing down so that everything can work out. But it really is, I feel like every scene that I see him in, it's like he longs for the good old days. You know what I mean? There's this like sadness in him that the Jedi couldn't be what they once were. You know what I mean?
Right.
He longs for this connection with other Jedi and this sort of like camaraderie that they used to have, maybe. I really, I mean, it's one of those things where like, I suspect, you know, that there's some amount of regret in him. You know what I mean? Like to be this thing, this like, I mean, he has to look at himself as a fallen version of what he once was, even if he feels like he has a moral high ground here of some kind. High ground. But it's just this sort of like, oh man, the I don't, maybe not conflict in the character, but the dual things in this character, the sort of like sadness to destroy a Jedi, you know, this sadness that it has to come to us fighting. That's the key
word there. Yeah. Is sadness. Yeah. Because I think it's this brokenness almost. This just like, it's just like he talks about, the old Jedi Order. Like a couple times he talks about like, the old Jedi Order, like things that he, like you said, he's just like longing for what used to be, sort of. Yeah.
Well, and he's this sort of like, it's all this like, you know, this poetic tragedy, you know, and I don't know. I find him so interesting, and I want so bad for him to like see the light. You know what I mean? Like, gosh, I want that. I think that'd be so cool. But I suspect it won't work out. And, you know, it is like you said, like, I don't know what he expected when Ahsoka came. He knew it was inevitable that she was going to come. Did he think that like he'd be able to be like, look, let's just go and see what happens? You know what I mean? Like, I don't know.
Right.
I mean, Ahsoka certainly has a reputation, right? And I mean, like, she's one of the only like Jedi type characters out there, even if she's not actually Jedi. And it just, maybe he was hoping she'd come and they'd be able to like catch up a little bit and like part not quite as enemies even. I don't know.
Right. Man. Well, and the very first thing he said to her was that Anakin spoke highly of you. So it does beg the question, was he genuinely like, maybe we can have a conversation, or was that manipulation? Because when you see him talk to Sabine a little bit later, it's 100% manipulation. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, absolutely. It feels like, now he does, you know, stand
doesn't
by
mean
his
he
word
doesn't believe what he's saying.
True. But that's true. He does seem to fully believe what he's saying, because I think he thinks that whatever he's doing is the right action for good, not for the dark side, you know, not for his good at least, or like what he wants out of life. Yeah.
Right.
So speaking of Sabine, I don't know if you're okay with jumping onto that, but so then she shows up at this, you know, lightsaber battle.
Well, after Shin.
First Shin, right. Shin shows up and you see Ahsoka with this like,
maybe emotional outburst. Yeah.
Yeah. Oh yeah. And she, you know, throws Shin against the rocks, only to have Sabine come very shortly over the ridge, kind of right there too. And then she has the same kind of like, Sabine, like, you know, moment of like, okay, good, she's okay. And Sabine picks up the map and is holding her blaster to it. Meanwhile, Ahsoka is right near the edge of the cliff, and it's this like, destroy it, like do it, get rid of it. And then, you know, you see her not destroying it. You see the struggle automatically, like right there. And then, you know, then she doesn't destroy it. She tells Baylan to stop. And then, you know, with Ahsoka being pushed over the edge, she's still got the blaster to the map, and he's very calmly walking over to her, saying, very go ahead, much destroy it.
Like a dark side, like Predator, like, you know, it reminds me of the Emperor a little bit. The sort of like, you know, take your weapon, strike me down. You know, it's this like, absolutely. I dare you.
It's just like, destroy it. Yeah, go ahead, destroy it. You know, just do it. And she says that she, you know, will. And he's like, but, you know, you're not like your master. He starts to kind of mess with her a little bit. And he starts to bring up Ezra. And these are all things that it's like, well, I wonder how he knows about all of this too. Do you know what I mean?
I want to touch on that real quick. Is it? Yeah. I mean, because we know, again, in the movies, even now in the sequel trilogy, Kylo Ren uses the Force to like interrogate people, and he can like read their minds a little bit and everything. You know?
Yeah.
So maybe it's something like that. Maybe it's a Force power thing, or maybe he just studies up on all the like Jedi-ish people that are around. Right. You know, I mean, certainly there are Imperial records and that sort of thing from the time when she was part of the rebellion. Who knows?
For sure. Well, and if he knew about Ahsoka, he knew who Ahsoka was. It's likely that he, you know, had some knowledge of what happened with her and who her Padawan. I mean, he probably knew some of that story anyway. But
he sends Shin. Sorry, real quick. He sends Shin to Lothal in the first episode.
That's right. Yeah,
and he said that's where Ahsoka's Padawan is.
Yeah. Yeah.
So like he knew from the start, and again, I don't know how, but
yeah. And so in this moment, then he's like starting to kind of go, you know, like if you want to see Ezra again, like I can make that happen. Like he's waiting for you there. You know, that's kind of what he's saying to her. Like you'll see your friend again. Like he says that, you know, And he even mentions, he tries to build this bond with her and also put a wedge between her and Ahsoka, because there's this moment where he says, you know, like that your master didn't protect you. Your master didn't, you know, and we find out, and you can kind of talk about this more, but there's this comment he makes. I can't remember how he said it, but you know, that's basically Ahsoka's fault, or, you know, that her family died on Mandalore. Like that's the implication we get, and that we don't know the whole story there yet, but, which we can delve into, but in this moment, he tries to bond with her. And then he says, this is what's crazy. He says, I give you my word, no harm will come to you, Sabine. You will be reunited with your friend. It's the only way. Like, this is it. Like, you're going to be reunited. I mean, he makes these promises that are completely empty. You know, he has no idea. But it's this manipulation of what he can tell is an emotional kid, basically. I mean, she's just seen Ahsoka go over the cliff. And in some ways, I kind of say, like, Sabine caves, but she's all alone now. Can you blame her? Like, I don't. It's funny because I was mad at her at the beginning.
I do.
Because she ran away. Well, yeah, you can still blame her because it's Thrawn and she should know better. But, you know, it's interesting to see her struggle with this and then her just kind of give in. I mean, it's that important to her to see Ezra to sacrifice, you know, everything else.
Yeah.
So,
yeah. So that's an interesting point. Her attachment to Ezra is strong, which seems like a reason she shouldn't be trained as a Jedi, along with her lack of connection to the Force, which is another interesting point here that I think I took off the notes. But I don't know if we've ever seen someone who is not Force sensitive tempted by the dark side of the Force. You know what I mean?
Right.
Like there's this sort of like, I guess I've never thought about it, but like, do you have to be particularly Force sensitive to be like tempted by the dark side, sort of, you know, like the promise of power and everything? Like,
sure.
I don't know. It's an interesting thing that I'd never considered before, you know, seeing this play out.
Right.
It feels like she gives up pretty easy to me, and that kind of bugs me.
Yeah.
And I felt that way in Rebels, right? With Ezra. Yeah. Every time it seems like Maul or somebody comes around, there's this like, oh, you know, like they hold on to the Sith holocron and all this stuff. And I'm just like, are you guys idiots? Like the Sith are the bad guys. Leave them alone. Darth Maul looks like a villain.
Yeah.
He is a villain. I mean, it's like this guy goes like, oh, well, he has something to teach me. You know, he calls himself Old Master. Call me Old Master. I'd be like, okay, you're a creep. I am not going with you. Clearly. You know? It's just like, hey, kid, you know, like, you want to climb this mountain, and I have Sith powers too. It's like, okay, let's never see each other again. It just, anyway, it's nonsense. But I some of that can be explained away because it's a cartoon, right? Now this is live action. Sabine is, you know, something of a full grown woman by now, right? I mean, she's probably in her 20s. I don't know.
Yeah,
but
at least.
It bothers me that like, the very most basic like tenets of the Jedi, you know, thing are like, resist the dark side. Right. And this is like, you know, the simplest, like, hey, well, you could save your friend. I mean, like, you know, not even save. We don't know what's happened.
We don't know that he's alive.
We don't know that he's in peril even. You know what I mean? Like he might be vacationing on some beach in this far off galaxy for all we know. Now that's probably not the case. You know, it is much more likely that he'd be dead, but it also feels kind of like, okay, so like everybody in the galaxy, you know, to be like oppressed by an evil empire again, or my one friend who might be alive, you know, it just feels like, this is basic stuff.
It's a no-brainer.
I don't know. It just, which to me says either it feels like a little weak in terms of writing, but sorry, let me just.
But one thing
it feels like it could be a little weak in terms of writing, or it's fake. And she's letting this happen because she believes she can spin this around somehow. You know what I mean?
Sure.
Which maybe she can. Maybe that's what's happening. But again, I you know, counteracting my own like points here. But this like this feeling that she's going through. You mentioned, excuse me, her. We didn't know until now that her family was dead, right?
Yeah.
And we had talked in the earlier episodes like, you know, something's happened because she's not wearing her Mandalorian armor, you know, and it's like, she just seems lost. Right. And like, I don't know. I feel like, and this is, this shows good writing, that like they've really built her up to be this, like, I mean, she was confident and she was, strong and everything. And like, she just seems weak and she seems sad now and everything. And more, it's like, yeah, well, like, her family, is nowhere to be found. We didn't know, they are dead now.
Right.
And her like friend family, they're scattered and mostly gone. And
right.
It just kind of feels like, who can she turn to anymore? She had
Sure.
this, this Jedi master, whatever she is,
right?
And that's fallen through too. You know what I mean? It just feels like this poor girl has nobody. Even her Jedi master in this moment she thinks is gone. So maybe that's what it is.
Sure.
I have no one
She's
left.
Given up hope.
Maybe Ezra. And that's obviously a very difficult place to be. But
right.
It's still hard to me to think that she's Jedi material if like that.
Sure.
Anyway, so we'll see. We'll see where that goes. But the revelation of her parents, her family dying on Mandalore, and he says, because your master didn't trust you, right?
Yeah.
So there's a story there I'd be interested in knowing about,
Yeah.
But we'll see.
For sure. Well, and I think, one of the things that's interesting is almost immediately after Baylan has this moment with her, puts the mat back on, Shin wakes up and starts to force choke her, right? And Baylan goes, hey, stop. Like, I gave her my word. And unlike her former master, I shall keep mine.
Yeah.
So then I go,
she says, he says, I'm a man of honor or something.
Yeah. And it's like, well, then what does that even mean? What is he referring to? Because it seems like he didn't really know Ahsoka. Because he's like, oh, well, everybody knew Anakin. And I knew that you were Anakin's Padawan. I mean, that's kind of the impression we get from the way he interacts with her.
Right.
But then it's like, he seems to know something that also Sabine knows. And it probably relates to her family on Mandalore. I think that's probably what it relates to.
We're missing part of the story still.
Correct. Yeah. So anyway, so that's that moment. And then, and then Sabine is in handcuffs and goes with him, Yeah. So.
Yeah. Well, and obviously there's this interesting dynamic between Sabine and Shin. And I wonder if in the end she'll convince Shin to like leave her master or something like that, because it just feels like they're setting them up to be like friends rather than enemies somehow.
Right.
Because they are so clearly against each other and sort of competition-y against each other.
That's very true.
But it's a heck of a thing. Are you ready to move on to the final, like, insane
final
point?
Moment. Sure.
So, Ahsoka, who again, I honestly didn't think she was dead. People rarely fall from great heights and die in Star Wars anymore, or stay dead, I should say.
Especially into water,
Yeah. But there's this really cool transition. Good job, to the whatever art department or whoever manages this stuff, where it pans from this above view of the rocky cliffs to the water. And then as it moves over, like suddenly the water is this sort of like, it's still wavy, but it's the sort of like electrically like reflective thing. And you realize that it's Ahsoka, who, if you are, again, I assume everybody who's listening to this has seen all the Star Wars stuff. If you are familiar with the Rebel series, there is this thing called the World Between Worlds. We don't 100% know what it is, but we know that it connects to certain points in time. I don't think it connects everywhere in time, but like, across time and space. And so it's this big room and all these like catwalks from one space to another. And you're walking around and like, Ezra heard various Jedi at different times and everything. And this is, I think, one of Dave Filoni's, one of his like, dream childs, this whole thing. And he's got these like, apparently some basic rules to it. I've heard people say that Dave said in an interview that you can't go in one door you can't go one door into the World Between Worlds and leave another door. So that creates an interesting dynamic of how is this all going to work. But she wakes up and what we know is the World Between Worlds, right? At least I guess we assume it is at least very, very, very similar if it's not the World Between Worlds.
Right.
And she hears, of all people, her master, Anakin Skywalker, call her Snips, which is something we haven't heard since the Clone Wars, right?
Right. Which I enjoyed that. I appreciated that.
You thought it was cute.
I thought that was sweet.
I just thought that nickname was dumb, but I like
dumb,
the sentiment,
but
right?
It brought back the moment. Yeah, the nickname is dumb, but yes.
So she turns around and she says master and turns around and sees Anakin Skywalker, and it's Hayden Christensen, but he is youngified, whatever, digitally made to look younger, a lot better than they did in Kenobi, by the way.
Yes.
But he look like they get rid of the forehead wrinkles and everything, and he looks just about like he did right around the time of Episode 3, which was when he fell to the dark side completely and became Darth Vader and all that, right?
Right.
And I got to run through. I don't know if you've got a lot you want to say about this, Rach. Do you?
Well, I just want to say the very first thing he said after "Hello, Snips" is "Didn't expect to see you so soon." So that question mark of like, what does that mean?
Right.
Is very interesting. Yeah. So he expected to see her, but then, like you said, asking the questions that I know you have, so you can go into that. So
yeah. So we're certainly going to learn a lot in the next episode, right? I assume pretty much right after the bat.
Hopefully.
I hope they don't like push this until the end of the series or something.
Yeah.
But like, there are a million theories about what could be happening here.
Sure.
I've seen a lot of people say he's a Force ghost, right?
Mm-hmm.
Now, when they at some point when they re-released the Star Wars the original trilogy, they removed the actor who played Anakin Skywalker, old man Anakin Skywalker, in the original showing of the movies. At the end with the Ewoks, they removed his Force ghost and they put in Hayden Christensen, right? That's not uncommon knowledge, but when he comes in there, he is wearing classic Jedi robes, like what old Obi-Wan Kenobi wears, right? Mm-hmm. And so there are these questions. Anakin never wore those robes. Anakin always, of course, like roll my eyes, had to wear these like black leather straps and stuff across him. He just looked. I mean, it was like he was trying to make people think, "Yeah, I'm slipping to the dark side, you guys. Look at me." But like it always looks stupid to me. And that said, he's not wearing the Jedi robes that he wore at the end of Return of the Jedi. He is wearing his old Episode 3 getup with the black, right?
Yep. Yeah.
Which to me says, again, there are a lot of theories, people going around. A lot of people have said, maybe this is how Force ghosts look in the world between worlds. Maybe this is where they reside in a more physical sense before, like there's this sort of maybe in between death and becoming part of the quote unquote living force, where they're just part of the force around us and whatever.
Sure.
So, I mean, some people have speculated that it's that. I sure don't know what to say about it. But to me, it's like, if he was his Force ghost self, I feel like they would have made him look like he does at the end of Return of the Jedi. Right? Yeah. Which to me says this is something else. That's my gut, different.
Right.
Now, the world between worlds, we like just here's all that we know about it, or I should say all that I know about it. I know there's probably more, but Ezra goes in there from a temple on Lothal, a Jedi temple. Mm-hmm. He finds an entrance into there, right? Now, there's some interesting events have happened. At one point, while trying to find his way out or trying to figure out what was going on here, he sees Ahsoka about to be killed by Darth Vader, which happens in an episode of Rebels, when the same episode that he's like following around Darth Maul like an idiot, like he's not clearly a bad guy. And he manages to save her. He pulls her through a door into the world between worlds, right? Darth Vader gets allegedly crushed by all this stuff, and he saves her, right? Now, when she goes to escape, she goes back out into that same spot, right? She goes back into the, like, whatever, the Sith planet where all this, like, the old Sith super weapon, everything were. So that fits Filoni's rules, I guess, that she went back out there.
Right.
But she survived. And the idea is, otherwise she would not have survived. And this is a thing that people talked about for a long time, that people who didn't like the sequel trilogy were hoping that in saving Sabine, and now Sabine being alive, maybe she helps Luke be a better Jedi, and he doesn't turn on Ben Solo and cause all this to go wrong, right? So for some people, they were hoping the world between worlds is a key to a new timeline, to just ignore, the JJ
everything
and
that already
Ryan Johnson. Yeah.
That would be
So anyway,
interesting.
it seems unlikely. I'll say that.
That's a little intense. But
it seems like a lot of ignore what we spent billions of dollars on or whatever, right?
Right. Right.
But anyway, so that has happened in the world between worlds. He wants to go save Kanan at the time that Kanan dies. Sorry,
Right.
spoilers.
That's right.
At the end of Rebels. But she says, like, he can't, like, you can't do that because he died for a good reason. Like, he stopped this whole whatever, and if he hadn't done that, whatever. So there are these like important conversations. I think he connects with Yoda at one point in the world between worlds. Like, there's this like, it's like a radio hub where everybody can like reach each other or something. We don't know.
Yeah.
But he also at one point is tempted by Darth Sidious here. And that's the Emperor reaches out and tries to pull him and I don't know, Ahsoka maybe through. I can't remember exactly, but he reaches into the world between worlds with some sort of force magic. Maybe it's witch stuff. I don't know.
Sure.
But it's this interesting, like, we don't know what can happen here, but we have never, I should say, I don't think we've ever seen a dead Jedi show up in physical form here like this, just like show up, right? So does it mean that he came from the past and he entered by accident at some point? Does it mean that this is the like physical version of his force self that can only appear here? I don't know. But the way he says it, it just has this ring of like, that's what someone dead would say to someone else who just died. Like, oh, I didn't expect to see you here so soon. You know what I mean? Like, that's sort of what it feels like to me, is like this afterlife-y sort of like perspective or something. But here's the other twist at the very end, and you mentioned this early in the episode. We hear the Imperial March right at the end, and I'm like, oh, are you telling us this is a bad thing? The bum, 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 bum,
and it's just a couple notes, and it just and then it jumps into the Ahsoka
end of episode
like theme,
So I don't know, man. They're saying so much here and not really telling us anything at the same time. It's a really crazy spot to be in. And again, I was kind of blown away, and I didn't know what to do. I didn't know how we were going to do this episode, because I was like, several episodes up until this, we spend forever talking about these little nothing details, but like this, you could do a whole episode on why is Anakin Skywalker here. Other than the fact that he is, everybody's, favorite Star Wars guy these days, and it just makes a business sense to put him in.
Sure.
I hope that there's good reason for him to be in this, right?
I'm sure there is. They wouldn't have done. I mean, like, and I think you're right. It's an interesting perspective of like, could this be something of the dark side showing up? It is very interesting. I mean, like, we all know it's Anakin. They didn't need to play the theme for us to know that it is Anakin who becomes Vader. So it's like, well, what does this indicate? There was absolute purpose in playing that. Yeah. So we're just excited and interested to see what that means.
Yeah. So real quick, there's also a lot of talk of so the world between worlds does not only have like one entrance, right? There was an entrance on Lothal in this Jedi temple, but the assumption is that there are entrances in many places.
Right.
But Grand Admiral Thrawn at some point, and I've seen this on the internet a lot now, but I can't remember exactly when it happens. It's, I think, the last season. He moves portions of that Jedi temple from Lothal onto his ship, the Chimera, which is very unique, special Star Destroyer, right? And that is the ship that the Purrgil took across the galaxy. So, in theory, they get trapped over there. They can't. I don't know what the plan is for Morgan and Thrawn to get back. They've destroyed the sphere, but maybe they've got the information they need. I don't know.
They've got the coordinates from where they started. I'm sure they can use the same ones and flip it around and come back. But
but here's the thing: the world between worlds. If Ahsoka is there, if she can get there, then she could probably use the world between worlds. I guess, I don't know. Can she use it to exit onto Thrawn's ship? That's the question, right? Does that break my buddy Dave's rules? I don't know.
Right. And maybe there's some way around that with Anakin there or something. So, you know, it's all just a matter of who knows, and we'll just have to wait and see. So
I don't want this.
interesting.
I don't honestly. Probably I would have been happier if Anakin weren't in it. I like Hayden Christensen. I think he did a good job, and I'd love to see Anakin redeemed. But like that time has passed, right? In my mind, it's like he's Darth Vader. He turns good at the end. That's the end of the story.
Right.
I'm fine with
That's
that.
enough.
But,
yeah, that's fair. I think. I mean,
like,
I appreciate the concept, and I appreciate him being included because I think it was a fun moment. I don't know what it means for the future of the show and of the Star Wars universe of the timeline, like you said. I mean, who knows? But
yeah,
well,
my gut is that it's a trick, right? We know that the dark side
I think
characters could reach in here a little bit, but
yeah,
we'll
and it
see
feels
what happens,
like the Vader theme was indicative of that too. So, or the Imperial March, whatever. But yeah.
But, like I said, the first couple episodes of the show seemed like they were going a little bit slow. I was interested. They're a little bit slow. But this one feels like it just like they cranked the speed up till 10.
Yeah.
And I don't know. I don't know at all what to expect anymore. It's just crazy.
Sure.
So if nothing else, it's going to be interesting, right? I'm excited for
looking forward to it. Absolutely.
All right. Well, we got to cut this thing off. Are you good?
Yes, we do. I'm good.
All right. Well, for Pew Pew time, I'm Nate.
And I'm Rach. Pew pew.
And we'll see you next time. Pew 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 pew. All right. So the next step will be you learning lightsaber noises.
Yeah.
Think you can do that?